Welcome to the show, everyone. My name is Paul K. Lemire. This is Your City, Your Voice coming to you live from downtown Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada, in the studios of 4680Q today. And of course, today is a day that it's kind of melancholy. Um, it's a sad day, but it's a great day that we still remember those who fought and died for us. And it's Remembrance Day, and that's what the show's about today. Remembrance Day. I have my co-host Dave Wheeler in here, and we're going to talk about Lieutenant Robert Hampton Gray. Tell you how important he was to the war effort. This guy was a phenom of his day, and go through some of that. I want to start the show by acknowledging our sponsors: Wild Bill's Auto Repair and Body Shop, Pete's Pizza on Victoria Avenue, and Hamel Machine Company. We're going to remember those who died to keep our freedoms in Canada, those who still serve in the military, and those who served in the past, the veterans that are still alive, but were over there fighting in the front. We honor them today. And I know I had a moment of silence myself at 11 o'clock, the 11th hour of the 11th month of the 11th day. And but I want to have another moment of silence right now, remembering those who died in foreign wars and those who protect us today. Okay, Dave, and now I'm going to ask Dave to read In Flanders Field, written by Canadian physician Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. Go ahead, Dave, and this always brings a tear to my eye. I know that.
Well, I practiced a couple times to get away the first couple of tears. We'll see how I do. In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the skies the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Ooh. Whew, I made it.
No. Every time I hear that, it brings tears to my eyes. The brave men and women who fought and died.
What were they like?
I just can't.
What were they like? The countless dead. What were they like?
They were people that we knew. My grandmother lived right over there. Her brother, Frank Perotti, died in, I think, in Normandy, on the beaches of Normandy. He's buried in France. And I never got to know him. I was born after he went to war and died. But I sure would have liked to know him and talk to him about, what it was like over there and that. But, unfortunately, he never came home. And there was thousands, hundreds of thousands that never came home. And there are people that we know, and there's some people still alive who actually were there, and we see them, on TV regularly. We see them at Legions, and man, every time I see a veteran or somebody in uniform, I thank them for their service. I really do, and I don't care if I'm in Canada or the United States. If I see somebody in a uniform from the service, I always thank them. And that's it. That's what they brought to us right now.
Remember, every young man that went over there, every young woman as a nurse or other auxiliary worker, never came back the same. Their parts of their youth were ripped from them, even if they weren't wounded or anything else like that. Most of them knew somebody that was wounded or died, but even if they hadn't and went through the war in some capacity, they were never returned the same. So their life was changed irrevocably by a war. They should have been a peaceful citizen doing their ordinary thing, developing as they should, but that tainted and marked their life thereafter. They'll never get the images of war out of them. Never.
No, not in those trenches, shooting at people they didn't even really have anything against or know. I mean, that's got to be tough. Just itself, that's not what we're about. Sane people aren't about shooting other people.
Yeah. A friend of ours, his father was a pilot, and you said you wouldn't mind talking to your uncle if he hadn't died about what was. He wouldn't tell you because he couldn't tell you, because most of the vets know that it's impossible to tell their story. It's impossible to be understood. And when our friend's father was a pilot in Wellington, as he kept pressing, our friend told me, he kept pressing him about the war. How come you never talked about it? How come you didn't tell me anything about it? And finally his father turned to him and says, I dropped bombs on people. I killed people. What do you want me to tell you? His own brother died in one of those Wellingtons as well. That's the last thing they want is war, another war. Most vets will tell you that. That's the last thing they wish no other war would ever happen because of what war is.
Yeah, a lot of people, even if you're talking to somebody who went to Vietnam or anything, very, very few will even talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. If somebody's blabbing about it, they probably didn't go. They say they did or whatever, but because it's not something that they talk about.
Yeah, you don't. Vietnam vets or any other vets, Korean vets. I had two uncles in the Korean War, and they never talked about it. They talked about it with each other or talked about it. So they'll never tell you about the war. The funny things around what happened. Yeah, they'll talk to you about what happened to them in Japan or when they've had
in Italy
or wherever they did when they had some fun or something. But about the battlefield and those conditions and those things, they won't tell you much. My one uncle just told me that it was cold. It was cold or hot and always hungry. That was his experience of Korea. That's the only thing he'd tell me about. And the other thing is in Vietnam, you didn't know where your enemy was, but in Korea, you knew where he was all the time. That's all I ever got out of him. That was the extent of, because there's no point in trying to tell me what was there, because if you don't have that lived experience, you'll never get it.
Yeah, well, true enough, right? True enough. Okay, Dave, you have another poem that you would like to read, so we're going to get to that now. And this is a poignant poem.
Yes, I used it a couple years ago on this show. I found it, and I found it again, and it kind of matches what we would, by coincidence, what we were just talking about. How people think of war who aren't involved in it, And this is called "Suicide in the Trenches." I knew a simple soldier boy who grinned at life in empty joy, slept soundly through the lonesome dark, and whistled early with the lark. In winter trenches, cowed and glum, with crumps and lice and lack of rum, he put a bullet through his brain. No one spoke of him again. You smug-faced crowds and kindling eyes, who cheer when soldier lads march by, sneak home and pray you'll never know the hell where youth and laughter go. So that pretty much follows what we were talking about by coincidence. The world at large, the people who are behind and talking about war and drumming up war and that don't know anything. And that last line, like, you'll never know the hell where youth and laughter go. Because as we said before, those young men will never come back the same if they survive, because their youth and their laughter has gone to hell, kind of a bit of it. They've seen things that people shouldn't see.
They really have, and of course, we see the movies about war on TV, and that it's not like that.
No.
Let me put it that way. It's not like that at all. it's a lot rougher and tougher. Those guys were tough guys to get through it. And if they lived, they got home.
Yeah, yeah. You talked to the First World War guys, where you talked about the whiz bangs, which were the bombs that whizzed overhead, whiz bang. If you didn't hear the whiz bang, you were the person that got blown up because you were happy you heard the whiz bang. But if you, but it would drive you nuts. It would drive you insane because it was constant and always loud and always there. And and they would think, I just hope that if one hits me, I'm dead because I don't want to end up like all those guys with lost limbs or lost faces. How many lost faces were there?
Yeah.
How many blinded people were there? When the French, they had to put a lot of money into making faces for all the soldiers that lost their faces. They had no face, no jaw, no nothing here. They had a throat, they could live, but they had no face, and nobody could look at them. That is the result of war. That's why we can't have it anymore. The end of it as soon as we can. Although it's been said over and over and over again by our own ex-soldiers and so on, somewhere along the line, we have to eliminate war. We have, by and large, eliminated most of it throughout history. We are going to war a lot less than we ever did before. There's been a lot less war casualties worldwide than ever before. But as long as that trend continues and it speeds up, I'll be happy.
Well, we are a lucky generation when you think about it, because here in Canada, the last war was World War II. I was born in 1952, and we never got drafted. Well, the Americans got drafted going to Vietnam and that. Canadians, we never got drafted. We never had to serve. We really, really are fortunate that Canada hasn't really been involved per se in a big war. We go in as peacekeepers. We have military that does peacekeeping and that kind of thing. But as far as going in and fighting, other than a couple skirmishes in maybe Afghanistan or in Beirut, but most of the time we're peacekeepers. We're at after it all happens to go in there and make sure everybody stays calm. That's more of our role. So we're a real lucky generation, Dave. We're very, very lucky. I consider myself really lucky.
Yeah, we went to war when we answered the call of General Order 5. The only time it's ever been invoked after the United States was attacked by Al Qaeda. The NATO entered Article 5, I guess, with General Order 5 or Article 5 it is. And that's the only time it's been invoked where all the NATO countries came together to help one country, and that was the United States in Afghanistan. So we did what we should do in Afghanistan, but that's probably about the only real war we've been involved. Some of our soldiers hit the real thick of it, but we lost 140, 150 guys over there. And we can't tell how many wounded. Anyway, and we lost a lot of people in the former Yugoslavia. We lost people in Rwanda, other places like that. So some of our peacekeepers are under the gun. So, and I don't know what's going to happen in Gaza, whether Canadians will be asked to stand in there, become part of a peacekeeping force. I doubt it, but that's maybe possible. So they're always going to be under threat. We can appreciate our peacekeepers as much as we did our soldiers in previous times.
For sure. And speaking of a brave guy, we have to tell you about Lieutenant Robert Hampton Gray, lovingly known as Hammy, a Canadian naval officer and pilot and recipient of the Victoria Cross, the highest military decoration for gallantry, awarded for the most conspicuous bravery in the face of the enemy. And he was the only personnel, along with Eugene Esmond of the Royal Navy Air Fleet, to be decorated with the Victoria Cross in the war. And he was also the last Canadian to be awarded the Victoria Cross. And Dave came up with this gentleman, and the story behind Hammy is just amazing. This guy was a pilot, but he was way more than that. This guy was a general utility guy who would go all over, not only flying planes and bombing ships and everything else, but also training. You train people
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Corsairs and that. Dave, what'd you find out about this guy? I mean, it's unbelievable. When I read about him, I can't believe I personally have never heard of the guy.
It's funny. Canadians do not fly the flag. They don't yell and scream at the top of the lungs. They're heroes. Like, Americans are good at that. They make sure you recognize the war heroes and stuff. We don't. We're very quiet. Now, this guy was the last Canadian airman to die in the war. The same day, another Canadian airman died. This was on August 9th, 1945, the day the Nagasaki bomb dropped. Now, he's the last one to die, but before I tell you that, I'll tell you his history. He joins up, he quits school and joins the military.
Where is
at
he
age
from?
40. He's from BC.
BC?
BC. So he's from BC and he joins up and he joins up and he goes to war right away. Then he goes to England, gets trained. He comes back to Canada, gets trained. He's trained on Hawker Hurricanes, which were kind of the workhorse fighter of the war for many, many years. Then he's transferred. He ends up in the African theater. Now you think, why in Nairobi? He's flying out of Nairobi in East Africa. Well, because the Italians are attacking the British. The Italians are attacking from their African colonies into Britain, and they were strafing their airfields and so on like that. So they needed a presence there, and they had to fight the Italians and get them out out of the way, because you can't have them threatening your ports and stuff on the east. So they took care of that. Now, after 2 years of doing that, he is transferred back to England, gets on the HMS Formidable, which is a British aircraft carrier, and he gets trained in Corsairs. Shortly after that's all done, they go up and they try to take out the Tirpitz. Tirpitz was a huge battleship, even bigger than the Bismarck, that was hiding in Norway fjords, and it would come out and challenge the convoys, not the convoys from North America, but the convoys from Britain into the Soviet Union. They needed a constant supply. The Soviet needed a constant supply of supplies. They didn't. They had all the men, but they didn't have as many supplies.
So that was the supply line running through the
over top Norway there.
Okay. Right? Yeah.
So that was the Tirpitz was a constant threat to that. So they had to get rid of, and the Tirpitz actually came out and bombarded Spitsbergen, which was an Allied base there. So they had to get rid of it. So Hammy here, Robert Gray, he was a pilot on a Corsair. That's the American fighter bomber that comes off of. He's trained in that. He comes and he attacks. He attacks the Tirpitz along with others. It didn't work. It didn't work at all. But he himself was noted as a brave fighter. He fought and came close enough to have his rudder shot off and was able to come back and return the plane to the aircraft carrier.
Now, he was mentioned for undaunted courage, skill, and determination in carrying out that attack on the Tirpitz. Even though it wasn't a successful operation, his determination, skill, and courage was mentioned in articles back in England and everything else. He was being in Canada. He was being recognized for his daring to go and try to get it.
Yes, he was. And even though the operation didn't work out so well, it was noted how it just wasn't planned right. It wasn't the operation that was going to take out the Tirpitz. I think later on they were taken out by regular bomber divisions, like heavy bombers. They finally took it out. But anyway, after that, he gets back on the HMS Formidable. And where do they go? They go out east. They've joined the British Pacific Fleet. Now, the British Pacific Fleet was the Brits had been fighting in Burma and Malaysia and places like that. That's where they were fighting the Japanese the most. So, but the Brits felt that they should expand their operations, and they got the British Pacific Fleet up and ready. They came. They did operations against the Japanese in Sumatra, and then moved on to become part of the invasion of Okinawa. So the HMS Formidable was sending its corsairs off to shoot up enemies in Okinawa, but they themselves became victims of a kamikaze flight.
Yeah, I saw that. The kamikaze pilots were blasting right into the Formidable,
Yeah.
and it had to go back to Sydney, Australia for a little bit of fixing up.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing you were like. Here you are now. Our friend Robert Gray, Hammy, he's in his Corsair. They got all the Corsairs off, so they didn't suffer anything. But some of the Avengers, the different kind of planes, did, and people got killed and so on and that. And there you go. Even late in the war, there is a zero. It got through somehow. It got through, and it made havoc on the Formidable, which is a big ship. So it strafed it as well. And everybody thinks the Zeros, you can just shoot them down with a gun. No, they were the most formidable fighter for the first couple of years of the war and still remained a threat right to the very end. So anyway, so they get fixed, and now the whole world, all of the Allies are preparing for the invasion of Japan. All the Anzacs, and I should say the British fleet, the British Pacific Fleet, most of their airmen were Canadian and New Zealanders. So there you have it. So the whole world, if you listen to everybody, all the troops are being transferred. They're getting to be ready to transfer to the Pacific Theater. They were thinking about this huge invasion of Japan. The Canadian soldiers were all being mustered and getting ready to be sent to the Japanese theater. They figured once they invade Japan, it will be a forever slug, but it will take 2 or 3 years before they subdue the Japanese. No one, except a few people, understood that there was a couple of bombs, Little Boy and Fat Boy.
Yeah.
And one was dropped on Hiroshima. And the day the one that was dropped in Nagasaki, August 9th, the Corsairs from Formidable were on an attack. They had an objective and an alternate. Their first objective was a waste of time because the field that they were going to attack was already not used. So that was so they went ahead and they attacked Okinawa Bay, where they had warships and other ships.
So a couple hours before they attacked Okinawa Bay, the Americans had just dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki.
That's right.
And in come the British right after it to take care of business on the ground in Okinawa Bay.
Yeah. So they continued the war effort. They, of course, didn't know that the war was imminently ending because of these 2 huge bombs. And let's face it, the Americans, the Allies only had the 2. So from this point on, they were bluffing the Japanese. More to come, but they didn't have one. So no one knew for sure if the war was over. So they continued doing the war. And this fella, Hammy, he struck a warship. He dropped a 500-pound bomb right behind the rear turret, I guess, gun turret, went into the engine room, into the magazine, destroyed the ship. It sank. Unfortunately, he took too many hits on the way. He was able to turn the plane, but it didn't last. It had to crash, and his body was never found. But he's a bit of a legend in and around Okinawa Bay right now. I think they even they have a monument to him somewhere there. So there you have it. And for doing this, he got the Victoria Cross. The last person to get it, and the last person ever to get it, because we don't have that Victoria Cross anymore. We have the Canadian Victoria Cross, which is quite different. The Victoria Cross was more of a Commonwealth thing, come out of Britain for all Commonwealth troops, but now we have our own. So he was the very last recipient of the Victoria Cross.
And he was one of the last Canadians to die during World War II.
The very last airman. There was one other airman that died the same day. No one knows. I don't think they know exactly which one died the last, it's usually given to Gray as being the last guy to die.
And he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for aiding and sinking a Japanese destroyer in the area of Tokyo when they led strafing missions in Tokyo. Then he got the Victoria Cross posthumously because he was already dead. Of course, he crashed his plane into the ocean after being hit. There is a memorial for Gray was erected in Oanaga Bay in 1989 in Sakayama Park, the only memorial dedicated to a foreign soldier on Japanese soil.
Yep.
And his life is recorded in a book called A Formidable Hero, Lieutenant R.H. Gray, VC, DSC, RCNBR, Distinguished Cross, Victoria Cross, and RCN Royal Canadian Navy VR, whatever that, I'm not sure exactly what that is.
Mm.
But whatever it is, maybe a Valor recipient or something. I don't know. But this guy was the real deal. You talk about a cowboy who wasn't afraid of anything, will fly into anything.
Oh, I forgot the part. I forgot the part that before that, back in July, he was on missions, strafing Tokyo's airfields and hitting merchant ships and seaplane bases and all that in the 28th. So this guy was a no nonsense figure.
Yeah, that
always in the most dangerous place.
Yeah, that little Oanaga Bay campaign. There's a group of Japanese naval vessels, and he scored a direct hit on the escort ship Amakusa, which was sunk rapidly. That's when his plane was damaged by AA fire. It crashed into the bay, but the battle took out 7 warships, killing over 200 personnel, including Japanese transport and naval vessels and Japanese destroyers. So it was a pretty big hit on Japan at that time. Like you said, not knowing that Nagasaki, Fat Boy and Little Boy, were going to end the war. Nobody knew at that time. So these were important battles they were winning to make inroads into Japan, and close out that part of the war with the Pacific Fleet involved, right? So amazing. And this guy led it all. I mean, he was the guy.
Yeah, he was. And one of the reasons, like I'd heard of him a few years ago. So when you contacted me, who you'd like to point out, and that came to my mind fairly quickly because I remember that story, and somebody had told me somewhere along the line.
Well,
so I looked it up.
Yeah, there was a citation for the awarding of the Victoria Cross, and it read as follows: for great valor in leading an attack on a Japanese destroyer in Oanaga One on 9th of August 1945 in the face of fire from shore batteries and a heavy concentration of fire from some 5 warships, Lieutenant Gray pressed his attack, flying very low in order to ensure success. And although he was hit and his aircraft was in flames, he obtained at least one direct hit, sinking the destroyer he was after. Lieutenant Gray has consistently shown a brilliant fighting spirit and most inspiring leadership. I don't know if you can say anything more about a person than that.
Yeah, the only sad thing is he was the last airman to give the supreme sacrifice. You could think if this guy had survived the war, how much good he would have done, how much he would have been able to take that war experience and applied it, particularly since he'd been part of training men and the variety of places that he had been throughout the world. So you would think, that could have been applied so well if he had survived. Sadly, though, it wasn't. And anyway, so because he was the last airman to die that I knew of, anyway, that's why I suggested him. In his vast career from Africa, fighting the Italians, to Norway, fighting the Germans, then to the Pacific, fighting in Sumatra, in Okinawa, and in Japan itself.
His remains were never found.
No.
He was listed as MIA and presumed dead. He is commemorated with other Canadians who died or were buried at sea during the First and Second World Wars at the Halifax Memorial and Point Pleasant Park in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He had the memorial erected in Onagawa Bay, for only foreign soldier ever honored on Japanese soil.
Yeah, he's a special person there. I remember that years and years ago. I remember something about a particular Canadian that was honored in Japan for some particular reason, and I think it's probably because of the whole tragedy of the situation. There's a young man from Canada who dies killing Japanese people at the moment the war really is about to end. You know.
Yeah, in 1946, the Geographic Board of Canada named a mountain in Kokanee Glacier Provincial Park after Gray, and his brother, who was also in the war, Flight Sergeant John Balfour Gray, Royal Canadian Air Force, who was also killed in World War II action. You might recognize the mountain as it's featured on the label of Kokanee beer.
All right.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
there's a little fact.
I didn't know that fact, but here's something interesting though. When he was taken back to England to do some training, he bumped into his brother, who was already there, and his brother was starring in a film called what was it? I put it down here somewhere. Target for Tonight. The Target for Tonight, and it got an honorary Academy Award in 1942.
Wow.
It's a British film about trying to get people to join the Air Force. And that would be New Zealanders, Aussies, Canadians, and a lot of Americans came over and tried to join too. They did. In that movie, his brother was had a role in that movie.
Oh, wow.
And he later died. But in that movie, I found out there was a guy by the name of Gordon Jackson. And Gordon Jackson, I don't know if any of you seen Upstairs, Downstairs, that British drama Upstairs, Downstairs that was so popular.
Is it a series?
It's a series, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't think I've ever seen it.
Well, I saw it, and or some of it, and there was a guy that plays the part of the butler in the family, and that guy was Gordon Jackson. You'll find Gordon Jackson in lots of films. You could recognize him. So he happened to also be in that film. So I just thought that would be a kind of a sight. It's so sad though that his brother ended up dying.
Both of them.
And I've talked to a bunch of British and airmen basically when I was flying back and forth over the Atlantic when I was living in working in Libya. I was in a lot of flights and I bumped into a lot of these old guys. And I sat beside a British airman for a whole 8 hours one time. He told me a lot of stuff. He figures that most of the guys died because of accidents more than they did due to actual combat. Because the planes were all shot up. They could never fix them completely. And the guys had only spotty training. And so a lot of the guys died because of accidents more rather than direct combat.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting, huh? But it makes sense because these things get shot up, they come in, and they get duct tape on them and turned around and sent back out. I mean, they had to get out there and fight, right?
Yeah.
So sadly, I can believe a lot of them went out there and they were not in the best shape. But yeah, it was what it was.
So imagine surviving combat raids after raid after raid after raid, getting flak shot at you, fighter jets shooting but not crippling you. You get back home, and the next day you get into the plane, but they didn't fix it well enough. It starts to lift off, and then it crashes, and you're dead. So you just went through all that and died with it by an accident.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. Now, there's a lot of Canadian military squadrons, ships, and even airports named after Hammy. I'm not going to mention them all. There's a lot of them, believe me. But every single one of them is a tribute to this brave and selfless Canadian that fought for our freedoms around the world. So there you go. This is a real, you talk about heroes. And I don't consider a quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings a hero. Probably a
No,
lot of
I
people
don't.
These are the guys who are the real heroes.
Yeah.
These are the real heroes.
Yeah,
That's why we do this.
I don't get that either. Calling certain sports stars heroes, I just don't get it. I don't.
These are the heroes.
Yes, they're real heroes. You know why? Because they're regular guys. They weren't going to make $1 billion, and they weren't. They left their homes. They went overseas. They fought for freedom. They made the supreme sacrifice, and all those who didn't never came back the same. So everybody made a sacrifice of one kind or another. And I don't think if we did a million shows like this today that we could come close to being appreciative enough.
No, it's impossible for what these guys went through. And like you said, they weren't there for the money. They were there for one thing, to preserve the Canadian freedoms. And that's why they were there. That's the only reason they were at war.
Yes.
A lot of them probably weren't even there for that. They were there because they had to go.
Yeah, there was a draft, I think, or conscription in Canada, but in First World War, I think there was. But most of the early bunches were all volunteers, and people knew. Once they began to understand what the Nazis were doing, and they didn't understand it wholly. They only understood part of it. If they knew the whole story like we do today, I think there'd be a lot more of them jumping off the couch and going, because you didn't want to live in a world like that. They really did save the world, particularly the Second World War. They saved the world from German aggression in the First World War, but really the Second World War, what the Japanese had been doing and particularly what the Germans had been doing, somehow they got infected with some sort of political military disease, and there was only one way to stop it, by facing violence with violence, unfortunately. But look at Germany today and look at Japan today. Two thriving societies, right? It worked.
There you go. It worked. Now, is there anything else you would like to talk about as far as Hammy goes?
No, only that we see that the range of his service. Nairobi fighting the Italians, then up Norway fighting the Germans, then into Sumatra, Okinawa, and Japan fighting the Japanese. His service is something. Most people don't really think of Canadians when they think of the Pacific War, but they did participate. And we do have to remember that on D-Day, Hong Kong was also hit. There was a whole pile of other places hit at the same time Pearl Harbor was hit. That's what I meant. A bunch of other places, including Hong Kong, and Canadians were stuck there, and they fought the best they could, but they got overwhelmed and were held as prisoners for years to come afterwards.
Yeah, you're right about the Pacific Theater, because most of the movies we see, and like movies do affect everybody, right? We see John Wayne and all these guys fighting the Japanese and Iwo Jima and all the other places they were fighting, but it was always Americans.
Yeah,
and so it was always Americans, right? And I don't think Canadians really had a feel for how many Canadians were involved in that whole Pacific Theater at the end of the day.
Yeah, mostly originally, like, Canadians were mostly galvanized towards the European war because they had to supply Europeans with the war materials. That's why Halifax and the other Canadian ports were so important to the war effort there. So most of the Canadian concentration was in Europe. The Allies decided to make Germany the priority during the war, but at the same time, the Australians, the New Zealanders, and the Americans and the Brits were fighting all the time the Japanese. Like I said, in Myanmar and what is now then Burma and Malaysia, and even approaches to India, the British had a lot of troops in there fighting brutal battles. It's often called the Forgotten War. There'll be a few Canadians involved in that, but mostly Aussies and New Zealanders. And in the early parts of the war, like the fleets, the ships, the airplanes, they had the Americans, the Brits, and the Australians and New Zealanders were all together in their actions in the early part of the Japanese War, and they were taking a shellacking all the time. And we never hear about that because we don't want to tell everybody how much we got beat up, before we started to win there. So,
yeah, strange.
yeah.
Strange
So
we don't
the
hear about that.
war was like that. The Allies were uncomfortable with one another from time to time, but it was an Allied world war against the Germans and the Japanese. As a matter of fact, the Russians kicked in for the coup de grace in the last few days of the war, and they pretty much wiped out the complete Manchurian army of the Japanese. That was a big factor in the Japanese surrendering as well. And we don't usually talk about foreign soldiers, but just think of what it must have been like to be a Russian soldier. Oh my God.
Okay, so basically, there's a couple of other things I want to talk about. We've talked about Hammy and what a great man he was, and how important he was to as part of our war effort back in World War II. Yesterday was also the 50th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and another sad event. And I wanted to just recognize the 29 men and their families. They lost their lives on this ship on November 10th, 1975, 50 years ago. And the chilling words, the last heard from the Big Fitz, they called Edmund Fitzgerald the Big Fitz, was from Captain Ernest McSorley, and he radioed to the captain of the Arthur M. Anderson, "We are holding our own." Those were the last chilling words heard from the Edmund Fitzgerald. And then it disappeared. And it really is a sad day. And I mean, Gordon Lightfoot wrote the song about it. And it's one of the biggest losses probably ever in the Great Lakes. And there was a lot of ships lost in the Great Lakes. Lake Superior is a huge lake, and it does get nasty up there, especially when the gales of November come crashing.
Yes.
And that's not a joke. That's not a joke
out there. The truth, yes. Yeah, well, and that particular day, the gales were exceptionally strong, up to 90 miles an hour. Normally, bad ones are 60 miles an hour. And unfortunately, they had a great captain, and I think he was just overconfident in what the ship could take. It was a long, thin ship. It was only 75 feet across, but it was long. It was
probably 1,000 feet.
Was it one of the big ones? Probably a 1,000-footer. Yeah, I've seen a few of those down in Manicoke. They don't go through the canal. They just go from Lake Erie up to Superior and back again, and all those, right? So they don't go through the canal.
They'll fit in the locks. Yeah, they're big.
But they're for transporting goods and material for industries in and around the lakes. Very, very valuable. Well, the Edmund Fitzgerald was the largest when it was released. Early in its career, it was the largest. People came from all around to see it. It was pretty much thought to be like the Titanic, unsinkable. It was hugely well built, everything like that. But unfortunately, just like the Titanic, it was Mother Nature that decided its fate. And if you don't, I don't know. They say that the captain went out into open waters where the other tankers and the other ships were more hugging the shore to stay away from the worst of the gales. He confidently just plugged ahead and went. He had confidence in the ship, but it was misplaced confidence.
Yeah, it just goes to show you that no matter how big, how powerful, machines are nothing against the fury of Mother Nature.
No, she's the boss.
She's the boss. And there you go. There was the Edmund Fitzgerald yesterday. So God bless them all. May they rest in peace. And they died what they loved doing, I guess. I mean, they were sailors.
But it is pointed out that for the 100 years prior to the Edmund Fitzgerald, There were 6,000 wrecks, 30,000 people died. After the Edmund Fitzgerald and the attention that was brought, help brought by Gordon Lightfoot, of course, but by others, put the Edmund Fitzgerald out front, and people were forced to make better safety for ships, and they have not had a major disaster since then. They've had 6,000 before 1975 and not one in the 50 years after. So
interesting.
So whatever came of the tragic, sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald was a positive thing. And I think probably the families of the 29 crew members can take some solace in that these guys did not die in vain. That their death was taken seriously enough to change maritime rules and regulations and safety. And they have not had anything like that since that time.
Something good came out of it.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're going to see that. Like something good always, disasters, you talk about them. But usually something good comes out of it because people learn from it. And, there's always something that's learned from these disasters, just like the crash last week of the MD-11 on UPS cargo freighter. I mean, now they know there's a problem. They knew before, but now they really know. They'll ground that fleet and it'll never come back. And the same with the Edmund Fitzgerald. They put more safety features on these ships. They probably have stricter guidelines on when they sail. They have better Doppler radar and technology to help them get through these storms, either by avoiding them or by taking shelter in Whitefish Bay. Or
that's where
like
they were trying to head towards Whitefish Bay. And unfortunately, they didn't make it. But I would say though that if you look at ships now, you'll see this orange thing on them, on a ramp kind of thing. That's because the sailors and other workers on the ship can go in there, clamp it up, and drop it, and got off the ship, plunge out of the ship. They use this on the rigs, the oil rigs out at sea too. You can slide into them. They'll slide into the sea. You'll go hit the sea, but you'll be able to stay alive because these things are unsinkable, and you'll stay alive. Edmund Fitzgerald didn't have anything like that. I don't even know if it had lifeboats or could even have utilized its lifeboats the way things happened.
I don't think it had any. I've never heard of lifeboats on the Edmund Fitzgerald.
You think they should have had some, but whether or not they could have been used in weather like that, I don't know.
Yeah. There might have been an open one or something. I don't know. Maybe an inflatable. I don't know what the heck. That's a great question. I've never read anything about it though. But nowadays they do have that capsule. It's like a capsule they get into. Yep. It's all protected from the weather. It's sealed and it's orange, so you can see it in the ocean bobbing around. So yeah, they've taken the procedures that are necessary to make them safer.
Yeah, it's unfortunate things like the Titanic or the Edmund Fitzgerald have to happen. But if you learn from that, I think that's probably those two lessons, the bitter lessons that we learned, probably saved many, many more lives as a consequence of that.
It's probably a really good tribute to the men who died that, more of the sailors aren't going to die because now they've taken these steps to do it. So that's their tribute out of all this. They didn't die in vain.
Yeah, every year they do the 29 bells, but I think this year they're going to do the 30 bells. And the 29 bells are for each of the different members. And that last bell is in recognition for all the other seamen or sailors who have died.
Oh, that's great.
And
that's great. Okay, now I'm going to end the show with a question from one of my regular listeners, right? And at Penny Brookify sent me a message this morning and said, this Remembrance Day, I wonder what our vets think of Canada today. And, I think this is a perennial question. It's a question that comes up all the time. What would our veterans from World War II think of the hippies in the 60s? What would they think of rock and roll? What would they think of these long-haired people, right? There's always that question of what our veterans would think of. And I have to think that they fought to save the freedoms we enjoy. Now, would they be happy seeing what we've done with the freedoms they've brought to us and helped us to save and give to us? What have we done with these freedoms? Or would they be turning over in their grave saying, "Oh my God, like what the heck did we even go there for?" What do you think, Dave? That's a really good question right there.
Well, until now, we're all very, very anxious because of what's happening in our government here in this country and the other democracies in the world. In the United States, a big way. But every time one of these challenges have always come up in other times in our history, a democracy's found a way of overcoming it and rebirthing itself. So I think they would see that. In the end, they would think it's better that you be fighting politically than with guns. Because if you're fighting politically, then that means you haven't got to the point where you're pulling out guns and shooting each other. So that's a victory for us. That's what they would think. Because that's not what happens in other countries, is it? Right?
No.
It's guns and power. And the old idea that there is no truth, just power, is a fear that every democracy has, right? There is no truth, just power. That's a fear that every democracy has because they're worried about power overcoming rights and the hard work that democracies do. Democracy is a hard work because it's never satisfying to anyone because it always has to do with compromise. But year by year by year, our society gets better and stronger, and people overall get more and more health care. They get more and more food. They get more and more everything. They're better at education. When we look at our situation now, we're all frightened and we're pulling our hair out. But if you look back, there were challenges all along democracy's way. Every moment of each generation has one. Democracy is not comfortable. And when we are in an uncomfortable situation with our democracy, but we see day by day our life improving somewhat, maybe 2 steps forward, half a step back, or 2 steps back, but sooner or later, you are improving society bit by bit and arguing and never being comfortable, politically. Well, I think they would think that's good because we're not shooting at each other. We might be yelling at each other. We might be having different ideas, but in the long run, no one's being thrown in jail.
Well, it takes me back to one of the All in the Family shows, Archie Bunker, right?
Yeah.
And he was sitting there with Mike and Gloria and Edith, and there was a friend of Mike's there. And, Archie is a big go to war, big American patriot and all that. And this kid turned out to be a draft dodger, and he went to Canada. And he didn't want the kid at the table. Now, one of Archie's old war buddies was coming over. And so he was there when this all happened. And he said, I don't know what the guy's name was. I can't remember. But let's just say his nickname was Pinky or something, right? Tell him he draft dodged and everything. He goes, no, Archie, I'm not going to tell him that. What? Because Archie's young. And he's, why not? He goes, well, you know what? My son went to Vietnam and he got killed in Vietnam. And he's not here to have supper with us. This young guy is. And I would like him to sit down at the table and have supper with us. Right? My son isn't here, but he is.
Wow.
And you sit there and you go, wow, that's a pretty good crazy statement, right? And of course, Archie, he's like calling him a pinko and everything else, right? Because he wouldn't go to Vietnam, and he's a draft dodger. I don't want no draft dodger sitting breaking bread with me. Archie Bunker, right? And his buddy said, "No, my son died in Vietnam, and I wish he was here. I want this young gentleman to sit down and have dinner with us because he is here." And everybody thinks Archie Bunker's racist, and they don't want to watch it and everything. But there's some moments there that really, really, teach everybody a lesson.
Yeah.
In all the rage and all the bigotry and everything else you find with Archie Bunker.
Yeah, well, if Archie Bunker was a real soldier, he wouldn't have been saying that. Well, he might have been. He might have been saying that. He might have been irked by someone dodging the draft, but he wouldn't be too willing to talk about the war, as we find vets don't really like to talk about it. But anyways, yeah. So yeah, but Archie Bunker was a pretty cool character, based on a British show, by the way.
Yeah. Steptoe and Son. That was Sanford and Son.
That was Sanford and Son.
No, what was it based on?
It was, I think, Love Thy Neighbor.
Yeah, something like that.
Love Thy Neighbor.
Anyway, we're going to get out of here. Thank you so much for tuning into the Remembrance Day show. We do it every year to honor our veterans and those who died in the war. And remember, lest we forget, our generation, remembers only because our parents were there. My great uncle was there. Our grandparents were there. They all fought in the war. So when we grew up knowing about the war and seeing how terrible it was, with our eyes. Today, the kids born after 2000 or something, 2000 sounds like it was yesterday. It was 25 years ago.
Yeah, really, yeah.
Sounds like it was yesterday.
Geez, yeah.
But these kids have never experienced this, and by that time, most of their grandparents has passed on. There's not too many left, and they really, really, it's really important for us as baby boomers and maybe people born in the 80s and 90s even to carry forward Remembrance Day, to remember the people who fought and died for our freedoms. Lest we forget isn't just something somebody wrote on something. It really is up to us and our children to bring forward Remembrance Day and remember the veterans, lest we forget.
Just think of this. All the guys from World War I, they're all gone now. But just think, I remember this, a parade, a veterans parade when I was a kid. And I looked at these old war heroes. I saw them coming. These were old, wrinkly old men coming down. So most of them were in their 70s or late 60s, early 70s when I saw this. That was the first wave. That was the first World War ones. And then later came the middle-aged guys with paunches on them. And I'm thinking, these are the war heroes? I'm thinking, these were the regular men, the average person that went off the war, not the professional soldier. These were the average day-to-day guys that went off the war. And think for yourself, too. It was a kind of epiphany to me. When I was 17 years old, I thought to myself, this is a time of life I would have been off to war, or here or next year. I would have been off the war and maybe killed and watched other people getting killed. And I thought of myself as 17, 18 years old. God, I've hardly been alive on this earth, and they're going to send me away. They would send me away to die, or possibly get killed, or kill someone else. And I'm thinking to myself, those guys actually had to live through that at the ages of anywhere from about 17 to 27, basically, when you were really young and the most important, most energetic time of your life. And you're in that situation.
You're lying in some foxhole in some place in Europe, cold and damp and no food and people shooting at you.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound good to me.
And other guys like you, young men, they should not have their lives wasted shooting at you and you shooting at them.
Yeah.
And you got to get, and most of the guys come back, do not want to see war again. They don't want war to ever happen again because they've seen it. And that's on both sides. Like you can imagine what the German soldiers thinking. They lost the war. They lost 9 million men in that war. And they must be thinking, near the end of the war, so let's say a soldier joined it when he was 20 years old and he 25 by the time he's out, the German soldier wondering what the heck was all that for?
Yeah, that's like almost a generation of men, 9 million people.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, and on that note, we're getting out of here. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'll be back tomorrow with Absolutely All Habs All Show. Thursday, I'm going to come in and I'm going to start going through the 330 pages of the city agenda, the capital budget. That's what I'm going through. I'm going to do the first 100 pages on Thursday. We'll talk about it and other stuff as well. Friday, maybe I'll go through another 100 pages, or I won't. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see, because it's a lot. It's a lot to go through. I'm at page 187 now, so I've almost got the second 100 I've gone through. So we'll talk about all that, and finally Friday we'll be back. And,
lest we forget where our money's being spent.
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding. And of course, Dave will be back on November the 25th. For the capital budget meeting, where we look through the capital budgets. City Council gives us their thoughts on it, and then it goes back. Any renovations, or what do you call that? Any renovation? Not renovations. Any readjustments or whatever you want to call it.
Something.
Yeah, something will be made, and it'll come back on. I think December the 9th. I want to say the 9th. These numbers are floating around in my head. But anyway, it could be the day I have to go to the dentist. I don't know, but it's December the something going to come back for the final okay and pass that capital budget as we move on to the operating budget, excuse me, which comes up in the new year in January. So take care, everybody. God bless you all. Don't forget to support our sponsors. I didn't really give them a big plug today. It was such a poignant day, Remembrance Day. But don't forget to support them. They support Remembrance Day. I know they do. They're just great people. And we're talking about Wild Bill's Auto Repair and Body Shop, Pete's Pizza on Victoria Avenue, and Hamel Machine Company. See you tomorrow with Absolutely Tune In. Or if you don't like the Habs, tune in Thursday for Your City, Your Voice on Straight Talk Thursday. Promises made, promises kept. See you tomorrow. See you Thursday, whenever. We'll be back. Have a great day and enjoy the snow. Because I'm not. This isn't a really great day for me with snow. How about you, Davey boy?
Well, you know what? When it snowed, I just didn't even think of it because it's just one of those things I expect to happen, And so I was surprised I saw the snow and I just started preparing, getting out my boots and stuff like that. And it occurred to me, this is November 7th, right? And it's really early. I know we usually get a snowstorm in November, but anyway, I just took it in stride. The seasons have changed.
Sends in what Lake Erie can send her, or whatever they say there. Anyway, thanks for coming in, Dave.
My pleasure, man.
It's always great to have you in the studio. See you later, everybody. Enjoy yourself. Be good to each other.